one quick question is part of the current discussions between the two families of Orthodoxy the lifting of anathemas for both what we can canonize as saints and on the other side as well? That's one question, part of the current discussion, not the earlier discussion. Secondly, when we study these ancient fathers to further understand what they meant and to clarify the differences and the similarities, is it important to study both the ancient fathers and what the churches believe currently today? Simply because we may be actually believing in the same thing currently today, which is maybe a good indication of where unity should start, rather than going back in history and trying to be very selective with the wording of particular church fathers. And lastly, I know there's three.
Well, maybe I begin with the two first questions, and I begin with to answer the second question, because you asked me, if I understand well, is it necessary to read the first church fathers? And I say yes, because all this is connected. So if we come back to the example of Severus of Antioch, who has been anathemized by the Eastern Orthodox, you know, Severus wanted just to remain faithful to the Christology of his master, we can say, and father, Cyril of Alexandria. And the Christology and theology of Cyril of Alexandria is nothing but a development of Saint Athanasius. You see, this is why in the Orthodox tradition, it's like a tree, you know, and so this is why we always speak of fruits in the Orthodox traditions and churches, because you speak of today, well, these fathers are still alive, we still read them, we still read their lives in the Synaxarium, that is in the lives of the saints, and when we are lucky enough to have translations of their texts, and if we have nice fathers to encourage us even to read some abstracts and to have some explanation, because as I said, if you begin to read Cyril of Alexandria by yourself, it's quite complex, because he has very rich vocabulary, and he wrote in Greek, by the way, and I mean, you know, it's like, I remember when I was listening to the talks of Pope Shenouda, and he knew his gospel texts and also the Old Testament by heart. So when he was speaking, the quotations were just coming out of his heart, of his mouth. Well, this is what you will find when you read the Church Fathers. So maybe for you as young people, it's something very strange, and no, it's too complicated, and these are the early Church Fathers, nothing to do with the Church of today. Well, be courageous enough. It's like when you want to learn how to swim, you know, you have to enter the water. And then at the beginning it's quite hard, you have to make so many efforts, but once you know how to swim, then you enjoy swimming. So I would say, if you read a little bit of the Church Fathers in a good translation, which of course is important, and then if you are given some explanations, and then you must acquire a certain vocabulary, you know, because there are many Greek words of that time used by the Church Fathers, which are, you know, have specific connotations, so you must be explained all that, and then you are ready to swim, that is, to read more of a text or other Church Fathers, and then of course you will see all the links, you know, generation after generation, from one father to another father, and you will see that it's not something so strange. The Church Fathers are doing nothing most of the time on, you know, then in fact, writing commentaries of the Gospel and Bible. So it's like any sermon given by a priest, during every liturgy. So it's not anything strange when you hear the sermon of the priest. So when you read like Cyril of Jerusalem, he's a great pedagogue, and he has texts about catechism, and I think this is a very interesting first reading of the Church Fathers. Or you take Basil of Caesarea, they are less difficult. Well, I don't say all the texts, but you can find some texts for first reading. And then, so I would not recommend to begin with Cyril of Alexandria, because it's a very, very rich vocabulary. So you have to prepare yourself, if you're priests or other people. Now you have these theological schools, including the Theological College of St. Cyril, and they are connected also with the Greek Orthodox College here in Sydney, where you have Greek professors and students, and maybe after some reading, you would like to read St. Cyril, St. Athanasius in Greek, so you will study patristic Greek, which is not the spoken Greek of today. So, as I said, you have to make efforts, but you will have many rewards. And coming I was just answering you by saying that all these church fathers are connected. In fact, they also quote each other, etc. Until today, when theologians of today, are writing, they always refer, the Orthodox theologians of today still refer to St. Cyril and the other early and later church fathers. About Severus and the anathema, which means that some of these fathers were rejected by the Chalcedonian or Eastern Orthodox, because they were understood to be heretic. Well, in the last book, before the last one, I had this book with articles about the dialogue between the Eastern Orthodox and Oriental Orthodox, and we have an article by a father called Andrew Louth, who is a great patristic specialist, Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox, from the Moscow Patriarchate, living in England, who has spent all his life, studying these church fathers. And in his article on Severus of Antioch, in fact, he explains very well that this connection, that Severus goes back to Cyril and Cyril goes back to Athanasius. But about the anathema, I think we have some specialists have clarified that these fathers like Severus of Antioch, Dioscoros of Alexandria, well, they just follow the terminology of St. Cyril. So once we accept this terminology, miaphysis, but including the humanity and divinity of Christ without separation, without mixture, then you understand that Severus is not a heretic. And about Dioscoros of Alexandria, we can say the same, plus that he was not anathemized for dogmatic reasons, but because he was asked to present himself in front of these council fathers and did not, so he disobeyed. So he was expelled, we can say, for canonical reasons, because he did not obey. So it has nothing to do with dogma or theology. Please, if you can just introduce yourself, so it can help me.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Christina, for your vivid explanation of Oriental and...
Very quick, too quick.
Okay, today is a very important day in Ethiopian Orthodox history. And you are here on the eve where the two synods separating for 27 years, they're going to meet tomorrow to unify and I hope all your prayers will be with us.
Wonderful.
So it is an important day. My question refers to about the original sin, or what we call it. We use the terms original sin and ancestral sin interchangeably. So is there any difference among the Oriental churches? This is related to Saint Mary, the Mother of God. Thank you very much.
I see. Well, your question is related to the Virgin Mary. So, well, in the Catholic tradition, you know, they elevate the Virgin nearly to a divine status, but in the Orthodox tradition, for the Eastern Orthodox and the Oriental Orthodox, of course, she's a woman, but she's the purest human being, you know, who lived on this earth. And we all have the feast of her elevation to heaven, which we call Dormition. It's the Dormition of the Virgin in August, either new or old calendars according to our churches, but the feast is the same. And so the difference with the Catholic Church is that they speak of Immaculate Conception, which in fact is a very new terminology, because it's only from the 19th century, you know, so it's quite new. And we Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox, Oriental Orthodox, we don't speak of Immaculate Conception, but we see the Virgin as the purest human being, and also that she was received in this pure being, you know, in her mission to heaven. And in the Greek Orthodox iconography, in fact, you can see that Christ receives her in heaven, you know. So, I don't know, this is what you wanted to discuss? And of course, in the Ethiopian tradition, the Virgin is very venerated, as she is in the Coptic Church, but in the Ethiopian tradition, the main festivals of the Virgin, which are annual, you know, but the main festivals are repeated each month. So, and the same for the main festivals of Christ and of some very important saints in the spirituality of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, which means that they have many festivals in Ethiopia, and that you spend many nights and days in church.
My name is Sandra. What's stopping the Oriental and Eastern Orthodox churches from unifying right now?
As I told you, the unofficial dialogue began in 1964, became official since 1985, continued very actively until 1993, and then my Metropolitan Damaskinos had a stroke, so his body was half paralyzed and he could not be active as before, but you know, he was alive and it was difficult to replace him. So he was replaced by Bishop Emmanuel, Metropolitan Emmanuel Adamakis of Paris, only after, you know, Metropolitan Damaskinos passed away. And then, as you know, there were so many problems in the Middle East. It was really a question of survival for so many Eastern and Oriental Orthodox in Syria, in Iraq in particular, but also in the neighboring countries, in Jordan, in Lebanon, not to speak of Turkey, where they had so many refugees, including Christian ones. So, you see, you cannot speak of theological topics when, I mean, you just have to find food and the first necessities for your family. But the good news is that now they will continue this dialogue in September in Cyprus. And so you see the Orthodox, the Eastern Orthodox are very traditional, like yours churches, but they are very, how can I say, they pay a lot of attention, you know, how for them to touch anything of this tradition, either at the liturgical level or anything else, is really something very, very difficult. They don't want anything to be changed, you know. So they require, I have put here all these texts of the dialogue between 1964 and 1993. So I know, for instance, that Pope Shenouda was ready to write an agreement with the so-called Eastern Orthodox churches, and I think that today the Syrian Orthodox, even the Ethiopians, or the Oriental Orthodox in India, and even the Armenians, you know, well, maybe have some questions, but would be ready in general for this unity. And I'm sorry to say that on the Eastern Orthodox side, they are much more conservative, and they want all these Christological texts, you know, to be tested, to be checked, to be, you know, every little detail should be clarified, you know. So they want so many more confirmations about the Orthodox Christology of fathers who are now considered as heretic. I spoke of Severos in particular, and also Dioscoros, but well, so you can, like everything in life, you can be minimalist or maximalist, and you can say, well, now we understood there is a misunderstanding in Christology, so let's go on and let's do something for this unity. But I must say, you know, like in the Coptic Orthodox Church, every time they had a meeting of the official dialogue, the texts which were elaborated about Christology were presented to the Coptic Orthodox Synod, and they were accepted by the Coptic Orthodox Synod. Then all this was reported in your church paper, Keraza. So everybody was informed, you see, from the bishops to the clergy to the lay people. And this should have been done in every church, which is not the case. So it's really in the Coptic Church that they have made so many efforts for informing and the clergy and the lay people. And so I would say in some very conservative churches like the Russian Orthodox or Greek Orthodox churches, these questions remained private, you know, so, and discussed among specialists, you know, some bishops, some theologians, but many people and clergy were not informed. So this is also stopping, I would say, the development of this bilateral dialogue, and this is why there is a great need for you know, having the documentation and for sharing this documentation with as many people as possible. And this is why we need the clergy of all these churches to be, first of all, well informed and to share, you know, a proper information, because there is a lot of prejudice and a lot of misunderstanding which is still alive, unfortunately. And that's why I visit all these theological colleges in Russia, Ukraine, Romania, Bulgaria, etc., to speak about this matter with the theological students, because they are the clergy of tomorrow. So they should have some information. Sometimes, of course, I'm criticized by very conservative Eastern Orthodox, but until now, I mean, after some conversation, well, they accept what I explain, and even they invite me to come back, which is a good sign.